the WrestleMania Minutes on Down the Aisle Wrestling Podcast with Robbie Mack and Kevin Laramie. Here's Kevin Laramie. WrestleMania 8, the big match that never happened, the Ric Flair Hulk Hogan promoted match that never really happened, Rob.
And it was even announced on TV. Jack Tunney even announced Hulk Hogan as the number one contender for the title. And from what I
press
understand,
conference, if you can remember, with 6 of them surrounding Jack Tunney on the podium.
yeah, I think it was Undertaker, Sid, Piper, Savage,
Hogan,
and
Flair.
and Ric Flair. Yeah,
Ric Flair the
So-
champion.
yes. So basically, what I to my understanding is that they obviously did, like with any major program, they'll do house shows. You know, because so the guys can work together, right? Obviously to get practice and from what I understand, it didn't draw so hot, so they scrapped everything and they went with Hogan versus Sid and Flair versus Savage.
And to this day, people are clamoring to get the real reason. They want to get the behind the scene dirt about what happened between Flair and Hogan and the whole situation, why the match never happened. But to this day, it's a missed opportunity that every single wrestling fan from this day still are angry about. We would have loved to have finally that clash in their prime, because it wasn't the same in WCW a couple years after this.
And even though they weren't in their prime in WCW, Kevin, the matches that they did have, the one at Bash of the Beach 94, the one at Halloween Havoc 94, and they had one at a Clash of the Champions at 94, all of them drew ridiculously great numbers on TV and for buy rates. So there's still money to be made. And I think this is a time when the WWF dropped the ball.
And to be honest, it drew a lot in 1992 as well, because it took place on April 5th, 1992, at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis, Indiana, with 62,167 people. That's a lot of people compared to LA a year prior.
Yeah, 100%. So, and again, this card also had 5 less matches than the previous WrestleManias. The previous WrestleManias had like 15 matches.
Yeah.
These ones had 10. So it was the same amount of time, but I think you cut a lot of the garbage, because if you look at the times of the matches, a lot of them are like over 10 minutes. When you take a look at some of the older ones, there's a lot of like 4, 5, 6-minute matches in here. There's a couple of them on WrestleMania 8, but there's not as many.
You know what catches my attention when you look at the build to WrestleMania 8, Rob?
Mm-hmm.
The
Royal
barbershop. No, the barbershop window incident happened a couple months before that. WrestleMania is the first WrestleMania you see Shawn Michaels in a single competition with Sensational Sherry. He defeated El Matador as the beginning of HBK, the icon, Mr. WrestleMania, just showstopper. Somebody stop me, please.
Mr. WrestleMania had at his first singles match at the WrestleMania. And not only that for me, but I kind of alluded to the fact that when you think of WrestleMania 8, don't you think of the 92 Royal Rumble?
Yeah, with Ric Flair outlasting, out-rumbling, out-royaling every single competitor in that Royal Rumble.
Arguably probably the best Royal Rumble
Yes,
to ever take place.
The one
100%.
You know what? They need to do something like that. The fact that the belt was on the line made that Royal Rumble so interesting, and so it was worth more than a normal Royal Rumble, and for that it was attention-grabbing.
What was the only time the WWF title had been on the line in the Royal Rumble, and it's the only time that it has been since. I think with the failure, I don't want to say failure, but with the lackluster of the past 2 Royal Rumbles, I think that might not be a horrible idea to look to in the future.
Absolutely. What was your favorite match of this pay-per-view WrestleMania 8?
My favorite match, well, I had a couple. The first one was Flair and Savage, because I think those guys always worked well together.
Yeah.
And not just in the ring, but they also told a great story together. And if you remember correctly, this is where they were doing the Miss Elizabeth, where Flair said he had pictures of Miss Elizabeth and he was going to unveil them and this, that, and the other. And it turns out that Flair actually had a doctored picture of Mr. Elizabeth because they kept promoting that they're going to show this big, huge centerfold. And I guess Savage nixed it at the last second because he said, Savage was a bit overprotective, so he didn't want those pictures being shown to the world. So yeah, they were doing that gimmick where they were trying to sell the fact that Elizabeth had an affair with Flair. So that was great. They did the gimmick where where Liz wasn't supposed to come down to ringside. You see a very, very young Shane McMahon come down to try to stop Miss Elizabeth coming from ringside. So the main event and the other match, Kevin, is the one for the Intercontinental title, Piper versus Bret Hart. Because again, it was a face versus face match, which you didn't see that often these
Bret
days.
Hart going over Piper for the Intercontinental Championship. One of Bret Hart's first moment in the sun, you could say.
Yeah, because Bret Hart was Intercontinental Champion before, but he lost to the Mountie because at the '92 Royal Rumble because there was talks that Bret Hart was going to go to WCW. So the Montreal Screwjob could have happened 5 years before it actually did, and this was Piper's only singles title. Actually, I think this is Piper's only title in WWF history.
And if you look at the card, a certain Undertaker went over Jake Roberts to become 1-0 in WrestleMania folklore.
Jake the Snake Robertson. This was his last match in not at WrestleMania, but in the WWF before his resurgence a few years later.
Absolutely. All right. The streak has begun. So, as the streak of WrestleMania minutes, going back to Las Vegas on the next show, live from a certain Roman Coliseum.
Ugh.